Montana Territory. Spring of 1883, the wind carried grit and hope alike across the wide plains. But both felt sharp on Briony Jameson's skin as she stepped down from the stagecoach in Stillwater. She kept her grip tight on the handle of her worn carpetbag, the only thing she had left after a long journey from Pennsylvania. Her hands were red from cold and blisters, but she straightened her back and looked around the small town square. A few men leaned against the post office, watching her. None of them looked like the man who had written her letters. Briony had spent the last of her savings on the coach fare, holding on to the promise of a new life. A man named Doyle had sent her 5 letters, asking her to come west and be his bride. He had seen her ad honest, direct, nothing fancy. She had not lied. She could cook, mend, and work hard, but she had no dowry, no family. Just her faith, her hands, and her hope. Doyle arrived late. He was tall, dressed in a town suit and hat too fine for the dirt streets. He looked her up and down like she was a cow at market. "You did not say you were this. Plain," he muttered. Briony blinked. "I said I was poor. I said I had nothing but what I carry," he sniffed. "I expected more. You said you could sew. You did not say you wore threadbare shoes." She held her head high. "I came here to be a wife." "Not to be bought." Doyle turned away, waving a hand. "I changed my mind. I need someone who can bring something to the table. Go back to where you came from." Briony stood frozen as he walked off. The coach was gone. The money, too. The wind picked up, tugging at her thin shawl. She did not cry. She had done enough of that on the journey. "Miss," a voice called behind her. She turned. A man stood near a wagon parked beside the general store. He wore plain work clothes, a broad hat, and had a strong, kind face. His hair was a little too long, and his eyes were the color of the hills after rain. 2 children stood beside him, a boy and a girl, no older than 6 or 7. The girl clutched his hand. The boy leaned against the wagon. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, but her hands were shaking. "I saw what happened," he said, walking closer. "That man's a fool." Briony looked down. "I will figure something out. I just need work, anywhere with a roof." He looked at her a long moment. "My name is Yates Forley. I have a farm just east of here. Lost my wife 2 years ago. These are my children, Hazel and Hugh. I came to town for supplies. We could use help. Cooking, cleaning, helping Hazel with her letters. I can pay fair." Briony looked up at him, surprised. I do not want pity." "You are not getting it," Yates said. "You are getting a chance." "Only if you want it." She looked at the children. Hazel gave her a small, quiet smile. Briony pressed her lips together, then nodded. "All right." Yates helped lift her bag into the wagon. The children scooted to make space, and Briony climbed in, careful not to brush against them too much. The road was bumpy, but the silence was not uncomfortable. His farm sat low beneath the hills, with a wide barn and a 2-story house that had seen better days but stood strong. It looked like it had been built with someone's 2 hands and a lot of stubbornness. Yates helped her down from the wagon. "You can take the spare room upstairs. I will show you around." Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke and flour. The kitchen was clean but plain. No woman's touch. Briony set her bag down and washed her hands at the basin. That night she cooked for them. Simple stew, but she added herbs from her bag, and the children ate every bite. Yates watched her quietly. "You can stay as long as you need," he said after dinner while they sat by the fire. Briony nodded. "I will earn my keep." He looked at her then. "You already have." She looked away, unsure what to say to that. Over the next days, she fell into rhythm. She patched Hugh's shirts, helped Hazel with her letters, and scrubbed the floors until they shone. She sang while she stirred pots and picked early greens from the garden. She did not ask for anything more than what she was given. Yates worked the fields, hauled timber, and came home with dirt under his nails and sun on his face. He always looked at her when she spoke, really looked. Not like Doyle, who had looked through her. One afternoon, a storm rolled in fast. Briony rushed to pull laundry from the line, but the wind was too strong. She slipped in the mud, her dress soaked. Yates came running, scooped her up before she could protest. "You could have broken your leg," he said, setting her inside by the fire. "I am fine," she whispered, shivering. He gently wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, then knelt to take off her wet shoes. His fingers were careful, warm. "You should not be out there alone," he said, voice low. She looked at him. "I am not used to anyone noticing." "Well, I notice," he said quietly. Briony's heart beat hard. That night, she found a jar of honey left on the kitchen table with a note. "For your tea, thought you might like something sweet." "Why?" She smiled, holding the note tight. The next days passed with a kind of peace she had never known. Hugh let her read to him at night, and Hazel had begun to hold tightly to her hand when they walked to the barn. Yates came in each evening with tired eyes and a small smile meant only for her. One morning, Briony found a broken fence post in the pasture. She hauled a hammer and wire out to fix it, but her hand slipped. She gasped as the wire bit into her palm. Yates spotted her from the field. He ran over, took her hand in his. "Let me," he said, his voice rough. "It is just a cut," she whispered. He pressed a cloth to it, eyes dark with worry. "You do not have to fix everything alone." She looked up at him. "I have always had to." His hand cupped her cheek. "You do not anymore." Briony leaned into his touch without thinking. He stepped back, clearing his throat. "Come inside." "Let me wrap that proper." They walked back in silence, but something had shifted. Briony felt it with every step. Something warm, something she had not dared to hope for. That night he knocked gently on her door. "I just wanted to say," he said, voice low, "you belong here." She opened the door wider. "I want to." And for the first time in years, Briony felt something like home. Briony rose before the sun. The house was still, shadowed in soft gray. She moved quietly through the kitchen, careful not to wake the children upstairs. Yesterday's bread had gone dry, so she soaked thick slices in milk and egg, frying them crisp with a pinch of cinnamon from the little tin she'd found tucked behind the salt. She didn't know who had left it there, maybe Yates' late wife, but she whispered a thank you all the same. Outside, the wind had settled. The air held the damp scent of thawing earth, and a few stubborn snow patches clung to the fence posts in the shaded corners of the yard. She set the breakfast to warm on the stove and stepped out to the porch, pulling her shawl around her shoulders. Yates was already in the barn, his outline visible through the open doors. The rooster called once, then went quiet again, as if thinking better of it. He came out wiping his hands on a rag. "Thought I heard someone in the kitchen." "I didn't want to waste the bread," she said, nodding toward the stove. He leaned against the rail. "You always think like that?" "I don't see any other way to think." He studied her, then looked out toward the pasture where the cattle were beginning to stir. "I'll be gone part of the day. McClynn's bull got into our south field. I'll need to ride over and straighten the fence line." She nodded once. "I'll keep the children busy." Hazel mentioned wanting to try stitching again. He gave a quiet hum. "She talks more when you're around." Briony glanced down at the porch boards. "She's a thoughtful girl. Reminds me of someone I used to know." "You don't talk much about where you come from." She raised her eyes. "Not much worth telling, just a place I left behind." The screen door creaked behind them. Hazel padded out, still in her nightdress, rubbing her eyes. "Come here, sweetheart," Briony said, crouching to tuck the girl's bare feet into her lap. "It's cold." Hazel leaned into her without a word. Yates watched, his jaw working slightly. "I'll be back before supper," he said, stepping off the porch. Briony felt Hazel's fingers curl into her sleeve. Later that morning, Briony showed Hazel how to knot thread without it slipping. Hugh sat nearby, carving a stick with a dull-edged knife under strict instruction not to cut toward his hand. The quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like a rhythm. Near noon, a knock came at the door. Briony wiped her hands on her apron and opened it to a woman with a square jaw and hair tucked under a faded bonnet. She held a basket in one hand and a folded paper in the other. "You must be the new housekeeper," the woman said, eyes sharp but not unkind. "I'm Ruth Calloway. My boy delivers the mail. This one came late." Briony took the letter. "Thank you." Ruth didn't move. "Yates has been alone a long time. This place was quiet even before his wife passed. I hope you're not planning to leave soon." "I didn't plan any of this," Briony said. "But I'm here now." Ruth gave a small nod. Good, he needs steady hands around him, and the children too. She handed over the basket. Eggs, my hens are overdoing it again. Briony set them gently on the counter. The letter was addressed in a fine hand. She recognized it immediately. Her sister-in-law, Josephine. She didn't read it right away. Instead, she stirred the soup for lunch, trimmed the ends off beans Hazel had brought in, and swept the parlor. Only after the children were napping did she sit at the kitchen table and open the message. Josephine's words were careful and formal. Her brother Briony's late husband had been dead for nearly 4 years now, but the family's silence had lingered long after. The letter said little. A birth, a death, a cousin marrying into a Boston family, no mention of Briony's departure. No inquiry after her health, just a list of events and a note about the weather back east. Briony folded the paper and set it in the stove. The flames took it quickly. By the time Yates returned, dusk had settled low over the hills. His shoulders sagged and his boots were streaked with dried mud. He washed at the pump while Briony finished ladling stew into bowls. At supper, Hazel showed him the seam she'd stitched. He held it up like it was something precious. After the children had gone upstairs, Briony poured the last of the coffee into 2 tin mugs and brought one to where Yates sat near the stove. He accepted it with a small nod. Fence'll hold for now. McClynn's bull's half blind. He doesn't mean trouble, but he finds it anyway. Briony sat across from him. Everyone's got something chasing them. He didn't answer right away. The fire popped. I used to think I had to carry everything by myself, he said. I wasn't sure I could ask for help and still look my children in the eye. She met his gaze. You don't have to ask anymore. I'm already here. He reached across, his hand covering hers. His skin was rough, but his grip was gentle. I know. The quiet stretched between them, full of things better left unspoken. Still, something passed through that silence, a kind of promise, not spoken aloud but understood. Briony didn't move her hand. Neither did he. Outside, the wind shifted, but the house held warm. Yates didn't often go into town more than once a week, but the next Friday he hitched the wagon early, tying down a crate of potatoes and a bundle of dried beans he'd promised to trade at the mercantile. Briony packed a small parcel of cornbread and wrapped a clean kerchief of Hazel's around a wedge of cheese for his lunch. As she handed it to him on the porch, he paused. Would you want to come along? Briony wiped her hands on her apron. Do you need help with the trading? I'd just like your company. She glanced back through the open door. Hazel and Hugh were stacking kindling under the hearth bench. Let me ask Hazel if she'd mind the house a few hours. Hazel, when asked, had simply nodded and said, I can make tea if he gets a cough again. You showed me how. That settled it. The road into Stillwater hadn't changed, but Briony saw it new again from beside Yates in the wagon, the way he pointed out the shift in the river bend or how the willows were leafing faster than usual. He didn't talk to fill space, and she didn't need him to. It was enough to sit beside someone who understood the value of quiet. At the mercantile, Yates traded with Mr. Elwell, a stooped man with a stiff leg and eyes that missed little. Briony wandered the shelves, her fingertips brushing over folded bolts of muslin, a tin of cloves, a row of shallow ink wells. She lingered at the back wall where the used books were stacked. One had a cracked brown spine and no title. She opened at poems, handwritten and pressed between yellowing pages. You read? Elwell asked from behind her. She turned, nodding once. That one's been here since last year. Nobody wanted it. He studied her. Take it if you like. I've nothing to trade for it. I've been overpaid in potatoes today. Call it even? She looked to Yates, who nodded once without speaking. She tucked the book under her arm. They ate lunch on the edge of the creek west of town. Yates passed her a slice of the cornbread she'd made, and she passed him the last of the cheese. Birds darted low over the water. I never asked, Yates said, chewing slow, what you hoped for when you answered that man's letter. Briony watched a beetle crawl across a smooth stone. A place to stand, she said. Nothing grand, just somewhere no one was waiting to take something from me. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I didn't write any letters. I thought about it. But I figured no woman would want a man who barely had time to shave and couldn't remember birthdays. She looked at him. Hazel told me you tried to bake a cake last year. He winced. Didn't rise. Ended up like a stone. She still talks about it. She thought it was funny. He chuckled low. Well, that's something. She reached into her basket and pulled out the book Elwell had given her. I'll read this to them tonight, something about stars and rivers. Hazel will like that. She likes you. Briony met his eyes, and you, he didn't look away. I'd like to know you better. If you want that too. She closed the book gently. I think I do. They were halfway home when a wheel caught in a rut and jostled the wagon hard to the left. Yates pulled the reins and slowed the team, then hopped down to check it. Briony climbed down too, lifting her skirts to avoid the mud. What is it? Axle's holding, but the wheel's loose. I'll tighten it. She crouched beside him. You've got a washer slipping. He looked at her with surprise. My father was a sawyer. Kept a cart with a wheel worse than this. I learned quick how to hold a wrench. He handed her the iron tool and they worked side by side. When it was done, he stood, wiping his hands. You keep surprising me. She gave a small smile. You haven't known me long enough not to be. When they reached the farm, Hazel had swept the porch and set a jar of wildflowers on the kitchen table. Hugh had found a feather and left it by Briony's mending basket. That night after supper, Briony read by lamplight while the children leaned against her. Yates sat nearby, sharpening his drawknife, listening when the children were asleep upstairs. She stayed by the fire, flipping through the pages of the book. Yates sat down beside her. You miss them. The life before, she didn't answer right away. I miss what I thought it might become, but not what it was. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I've got 2 children who trust you, a house that's steadier since you came. I don't want to rush what's good, but I don't want to walk past it either. Briony folded the book and held it in her lap. I've never had anyone say they wanted me to stay, not for the right reasons. He turned toward her. I want you to stay because the house feels wrong without you in it. She hesitated, then said quietly, then I will. He reached across the small space between them, and this time when he took her hand, she didn't draw away. Outside, the wind had fallen still. A hush settled deep over the hills, as if something had finally found its place. The first calf of the season came on a cold April morning. Briony heard the lowing before she'd even finished tying her apron. She found Hazel already up, peeking through the front window with her braid crooked over one shoulder. It's the spotted cow, the one with the nick in her ear, Hazel whispered. Briony glanced toward the barn. Yates and Hugh were already halfway down the slope, boots stamping frost from the grass. She pulled a shawl around Hazel's shoulders and kissed the top of her head. Stay inside, I'll be back soon. By the time she reached the barn, the calf had already come, slick and still, its mother breathing hard as Yates rubbed the small body with a dry sack. The air smelled of iron and hay. Briony knelt beside them without hesitation. Not breathing? She asked. Not yet, Yates said, voice tight. She reached for the calf's nose, clearing the wet membrane with her sleeve. Come on now, she murmured. Nothing here'll harm you. The calf gave a wet cough, then a shudder. Yates exhaled hard. Briony didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until her chest eased. I'll fetch another sack, she said, already rising. By dusk, the calf had stood twice, wobbling under the weight of its own legs. Hazel named it Clover. Hugh insisted it was a boy, but no one corrected him. That night, Briony sat on the edge of her bed, brushing out her hair. Her hands ached from the cold, but her mind felt still in a way it hadn't in years. The house was quiet. She heard the faint creak of the stair and the soft step of boots on the landing. May I come in? Yates' voice low. She opened the door. I didn't get to say proper thanks, he said. You knew what to do better than I did. I only remembered what I'd seen once before, she replied. Back east, a neighbor had a cow calve late one spring. I was 12. He leaned against the doorframe. You haven't spoken much about your growing up. There wasn't much ease in it, she said. My father worked until his hands closed in the night. My mother passed young. It was a house of work and silence. He looked at her a long moment. You carry yourself like someone who's had to fill too many shoes. I never knew which ones were mine, she said. He stepped closer. You found your footing here. She met his gaze. I think I did. He looked down at his hands, then back at her. Would you consider making it yours, this house, the land, my name? Her breath caught. You're asking me? I am, not because of what you do here, not even for Hazel and Hugh, though they love you. I'm asking because I can't imagine this place without you. You're not a man who says things to fill the air, she said. No, he agreed. But when I speak, I mean it. She set her brush down and crossed the room. Then yes, she said. I will. He reached for her hand and held it like something he'd waited a long time to find. They stood there, quiet but sure. The space between them finally closed. In the weeks that followed, Briony moved through the house with a steadiness that came not from duty but belonging. The neighbors came one by one with pies and jars of beans when word spread. Ruth Calloway brought a length of blue calico and told Briony to sew something for herself, not the children, not the kitchen a dress for standing beside a man who'd earned her. They married in the back pasture beneath the cottonwoods. Hazel held wildflowers, and Hugh dropped his only pair of clean gloves in the creek beforehand, but no one scolded him. Yates stood like the land itself, solid and weathered and good. That evening, Briony carried her boots in hand across the dew-wet grass. Yates followed, his coat slung over one shoulder. The children had fallen asleep near the fire, heads tucked against each other like barn swallows. Do you think they'll remember today? She asked, watching the windows glow soft from within. They'll remember how it felt, he said. That's what stays. Briony turned to him, and us, he took her hand. We're not a memory yet. We're just beginning. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest. The air was cool, but his arms were warm around her. For the first time, she felt not like someone who had survived, but someone who had arrived. The stars came out slow, one by one, over the still land. The night carried no wind. Only the sound of cattle lowing in the distance and the breathing of two people who had waited long enough for peace and found it, finally, in each other. The wheat came in thick and golden that summer, bending just slightly with the breeze as if bowing to the long work that had brought it forth. Briony pressed her hand to the window pane, watching Yates and Hazel disappear into it, their figures swallowed by the tall stalks. Hugh sat on the floor behind her, sorting nails into small piles like she'd shown him the day before. We'll need more jars, he said. Not looking up, she turned. Why's that? For the berries. Hazel said we'll find more this week than last. He furrowed his brow. We only got 4 empty ones left. Briony crouched beside him. Then when your pa hitches the wagon next, we'll ride in and see what Mr. Elwell has. Hugh nodded solemnly, satisfied. He returned to his sorting, moving a crooked nail into the discard pile with the others. Outside, the sun cut bold across the field. Briony rose and crossed to the porch, her skirts brushing the doorframe. A few hens scratched under the lilac bush, and the scent of July clung to everything: the dust, the sweat, the wild mint growing fierce by the well. Yates returned before noon, his shirt plastered to his back and his sleeves rolled to the elbows. Briony met him with a basin of cool water and a cloth. Hazel's with Ruth, he said, wiping his neck. She wanted to learn how to bind a book. Ruth's boy's been keeping old papers, said she could practice on those. Briony lifted the cloth from his hand and dabbed the back of his neck herself. She won't want to come home for hours. Yates looked up at her. Then we've got hours. They walked the edge of the pasture, where the grass grew shorter and the ground dipped low near the creek. A small stand of cottonwoods shaded the water, and Briony sat on the cool root of one, pulling her boots off and dipping her feet into the stream. Yates joined her, stretching his legs out, one hand resting on his knee. You ever think about what comes next? He asked. She looked at him, water slipping over her toes. I used to be afraid of that question. And now I think about what we'll build, what will grow. What we'll teach them. He ran his hand over his jaw. Hazel's already got more ease to her. She used to have bad dreams. Briony nodded. She doesn't anymore. They sat in silence, the water moving slow between their feet. A dragonfly landed on the hem of her skirt, its wings catching the light. She didn't move. "I've been thinking," Yates said after a while, "about adding another room onto the south side of the house." Briony turned to him. "For what?" "So you can have a place to sew without Hugh walking through every 10 minutes asking where his hammer's gone," she laughed. "Wouldn't be a very quiet room." "No," he agreed, "but it'd be yours." She leaned against his shoulder. "Then let's build it." By early fall, the walls were framed and the roof half-shingled. Hugh carried nails in an apron too big for him, and Hazel rubbed linseed oil into the new wood with careful hands. Briony had pieced together curtains from scraps Ruth had given her, and when the windows went in, they fluttered just right in the breeze. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Briony stood in the doorway of the new room, watching Yates smooth the floorboards with a hand plane. He worked slow, the way he always did when he wanted something done right. "I never thought I'd have something that began with me," she said. He looked up. "You're not beginning anymore, you're in it now." She crossed the room and knelt beside him, running her hand over the smooth wood. "It feels like mine." "It is." Later, they lay in bed, the windows open to let in the night air, and Briony traced the line of his collarbone with her fingertip. "You've given me more than I knew I needed," she said. "I didn't give you anything you didn't already carry." "I just saw it." She pressed her face to his chest, breathing in the scent of sun and wood smoke that clung to him always. "I want to stay here until my hair turns white. Then that's what we'll do." He kissed her temple and she closed her eyes, the weight in her chest gone the one she'd carried across states and years in silence. In its place was something steady, something that held. The seasons shifted. Snow came and went, and the fields turned green again. Hazel bound her first real book and gave it to Briony, who filled it with the names of seeds and the days they sprouted. Hugh built a slingshot and broke 3 porch rails before Yates confiscated it. The new room held warmth and laughter and sometimes quiet. When Briony sat there alone, sewing or reading, the door opened just enough to let in the sound of her family. One spring morning, Briony stood at the edge of the porch, one hand on her growing belly, the other holding a cup of cooled tea. Yates came up behind her and wrapped his arm around her waist. "Think it'll be a girl?" he asked. She smiled. "I think it'll be ours." He kissed her shoulder. "That's enough for me," and it was. It always had been.